the final module, we will discuss what we can do with all of this information. We talk about the various forms of discrimination and how one can show up as an ally. We also discuss exploring our own gender and sexuality, whether we are with a partner or we are single. And finally, we end this conversation with a discussion around coming out of the closet and what that actually means. Our society considers being cisgender and being heterosexual as the default. It is considered desirable. In fact, one of the first intimate relationships that we experience, that of our mother and our father, is cishet in nature. So we grow up believing that it is the only way to experience our gender identity or our sexual orientation. In fact, queer and trans people themselves have a lot of internalized queerphobia and transphobia because of what is taught to them, because of what the media represents, because of what is considered acceptable by our society. And also, it's important to remember that whenever a person is outside of these norms of being cisgender and heterosexual, they're also penalized. They're also met with discrimination, which is basically unequal treatment. Now, this discrimination can happen in socio-cultural settings, such as a person might not be invited to weddings or family functions. It can show up in legal situations where a cis person doesn't necessarily have to prove their identity, whereas a trans person has to prove their identity. It can also show up in medical situations where we still believe that all menstruators are women or that all women menstruate. But there are trans men and non-binary people who also menstruate, and there are trans women and some non-binary people who don't necessarily menstruate. It can also show up in professional settings wherein a person might not be afforded the same kind of opportunities and promotions that cisgender and heterosexual people might be afforded just because the person's identity is different. Now, this discrimination can also intensify with the play of other intersections such as age, religion, caste, class, a person's educational background, their complexion, and so on. So just like a person's privilege gets compounded when they have more and more privileged identities, for example, I am a cisgender person, I could be a Savarna woman, I could be college educated, I could be, have fairer skin, I could be young. This means that I am shielded from certain kinds of discrimination that a person who does not have the same identities as me will be met with. Me, for instance, with my sort of class privilege, I can move to another country where queerness and transness is more affirmed, and I can actually escape the kind of discrimination that I'm meted out with in my home country. So it's important for us to remember that there are these different intersections at play when we speak about discrimination and when we speak about the kind of queerphobia or transphobia that a person is met with. I know that I've shared a lot of different things with you and I've explained a lot of different terms, and you don't have to get it all, right? You don't really have to fully understand a person's identity in order to respect their humanity. And really, like listening to a person and just holding space for different experiences, being curious about people who might be different from you or who might have different experiences from you is really the first step. It doesn't mean that, your struggles are any less valid. All of us struggle, all of us have issues, but some of us struggle because of our identities. Now, let's take the example of feminism, right? Let's take the example of patriarchy. Of course, men are victims of patriarchy too. They suffer and they struggle as well. They are forced to fit into these boxes. They cannot express emotions. They are forced to be the breadwinners. And there are so many struggles that men go through because of patriarchy. However, their struggles are nothing compared to those of people of other genders. So similarly, you as a cishet person, of course you have struggles and you have issues too. But checking your own privilege means that understanding that other people might be suffering precisely because of the reasons why you might be rewarded. For instance, if you engage in a marriage, if you're a woman and you marry a man, you might be rewarded and there might be a big function and celebration for that. Whereas a queer person might not even have the right to marry or have their marriage legally recognized. So that's a very important part. Being empathetic towards other people and their struggles is a very important part of allyship. The other thing is, if you ever make a mistake, remember to be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up over it. Simply apologize, move on, and be mindful the next time. You are going to fail at this, and you are going to fail multiple times. I call myself, an ally to the anti-caste movement, but I constantly fail in showing up, whether it is in protests, whether it is in terms of taking up space, whether it's in terms of the nuance that I bring into my conversation, and that's okay. The important part is to remember to take accountability for any damage that I might have caused, and to constantly keep learning, and to also not make it the issue of the person who has been oppressed to explain things to you. There are so many resources available these days, and it's really no excuse. In fact, this course is a wonderful example of a resource that is available to you, wherein you can learn about different kinds of gender identities and sexual orientations. So put in the effort, read up, access resources, follow people on social media, if nothing else, right, who have different gender identities and sexual orientations, and educate yourself. Some queer and trans people might appreciate questions, and some of us might not really, and that's absolutely okay. You are not owed an explanation by anyone. And lastly, remember that allyship is a practice. You don't just become an ally to a movement by calling yourself one. You wake up each day making the choice to actively participate in the liberation of all people, because none of us is free till all of us are free. Isn't that true? So keep learning, keep growing, and be kind to yourself while you're in the process. And mistakes are a part of the journey. For example, I identify as an ally to the anti-caste movement, and I find that I am making mistakes and I am getting called out. What is important is that I listen to the people who I am trying to be an ally to, and I take accountability, and I ensure that I don't repeat the same mistakes over and over again and cause continuous harm to the people that I'm actually trying to be in solidarity with. So similarly, if you are someone who identifies as an LGBTQIA plus ally, what is important is that you take accountability, you listen, and you also do your own research. Don't make it the problem of the person to explain their identity, to constantly be your sort of walking, talking encyclopedia of different terms. Access resources like this course, read up. There are so many resources available on the internet. There are so many social media influencers who talk about these different issues. There are also like easy comic strips that are available. And if you're that kind of a learner, you can access those kinds of resources. You could also book, one-on-one sessions with some practitioners who will be able to educate you on these topics, take courses, and continuously challenge yourself to keep learning more. And remember that you don't just become an ally by calling yourself one. It is a practice. So you need to wake up every day and make the choice and constantly show up by way of an ally. And you can make simple allyship power moves. It doesn't have to be something major either. If you see that a person is being bullied because of their gender identity or sexual orientation, and you don't necessarily feel safe or comfortable to confront the bully, you can instead speak with the person who's being bullied later on and be affirming and validating to them. Or in the moment, you can actually distract the bully and diffuse the situation if that is something that you are able to do. It can also be in the way that you ask people their names and their pronouns and offer your own name and pronouns by way of normalizing the situation. You don't even have to wait till there is actually a queer or trans person present in the room in order for you to discuss pronouns. Make it a part of regular practice. If you're in a meeting, simply offer your name and pronouns, encouraging everyone to do the same. And keep learning, keep growing. There is no such thing as perfection when it comes to allyship. and it is okay that you are failing and you are making mistakes. Please continue to take accountability, and please continue to be your wonderful self as an ally. And in fact, a great way to show allyship is by exploring the different ways in which you might be queer, or your relationship with queerness. We now understand that sexuality is so much more than just the sex a person is having or not having. It includes a person's sexual orientation, their romantic orientation, behaviors of intimacy. It includes access to resources. It includes, what time of day a person would like to engage in behaviors of intimacy in, what are their kinks, what are their fetishes, what are their past experiences when it comes to their own sexuality, what are their fantasies, what are their aspiration when it comes to their sexual orientation and romantic orientation. So it's so expansive. Now, in the same vein, how does one discover what their sexual orientation is? Well, like we've been harping on this entire video, the only person who gets to decide your sexual orientation is you. And here are some questions that you can ask yourself. Who do you find yourself attracted to? And in what ways are you attracted to them? What kind of porn or erotica are you drawn to? What are the kinds of people that you are attracted to? What are the kinds of bodies you are attracted to? If you've engaged with a person of the same gender in the past, was that enjoyable? Is that something that you would do again? Was it about the person, or was it about their genitals? What kind of fantasies do you engage in? What kind of sexual acts are depicted there? And how do you in general feel when you hear these different sexual orientations, when you hear these different identities being mentioned? What sensations, what thoughts and what feelings come up for you? And you don't have to be single to explore your sexuality and or your sexual orientation either. You can be very happily booed up and still experiment with your sexuality and sexual orientation. Let me give you an example. I identify as a bisexual woman, and I am currently happily dating a man. This doesn't make my bisexuality any less valid or any less real. It doesn't have to mean that I have to be actively engaging in sex or sexual acts with a person of the same gender or with any other person. It's absolutely possible for you to be in a relationship with one person your entire life, and that person might have a particular gender identity, and for your sexual orientation to still be fluid. It's very, very important for all of us to remember that sexual orientation does not mean that there has to be some corollary action. It does not mean that we have to be having sex with a person or with a particular identity in order for it to be valid. So please bear in mind that self-identification and not your past or current relationships, your sexual or dating history, or anything of that sort which determines your sexual orientation. You are of a particular sexual orientation because you say that you are. Just like with our sexual orientation, it's also very natural for us to be curious about our gender identity, no matter what our age is. Here are some questions that you can honestly reflect on. How do you feel in your body? How do you feel about, certain body parts that have gender connotations, such as your genitals or your breasts? Do you feel like, for example, your breast should have been bigger or smaller or not been there at all? How do you feel when someone confuses you with some other gender identity? Do you feel happy? Do you feel sad? Do you feel confused? What comes up for you? And really, like when you look at people of different gender identities, what do you find aspirational, or what do you find more connection towards? Now, these are some questions that you can start reflecting on. Obviously, this is not a laundry list of questions, and this doesn't necessarily mean that you will arrive at a conclusion right away, but it's definitely a space for you to start your journey or start your exploration from. The thing with gender identity and sexual orientation experimentation when we are in a partnership or when we are all booed up, like I said before, is that there is another person and their feelings that are also involved in the process. So it's very important for us to, whenever we are comfortable, bring them into the conversation, try and be as honest as possible, set healthy boundaries, take their feelings into consideration as well, and not necessarily at the cost of our mental health or well-being, but at the same time to extend empathy and to also be patient with them while they come on board our journey of gender identity and sexual orientation exploration. Now that you've sort of figured out your gender identity and sexual orientation, you might experience many feelings. You might experience joy, you might experience comfort, you might also be scared or confused and disillusioned, and that's all okay. But if you are excited to share your revelation with other people, you might do so with something known as coming out. Coming out is basically self-disclosure of your own gender identity and sexual orientation. It's not just limited to queer and trans people. Cis-het people should also come out, in fact. We must not consider being cis and het as default, and each person should be allowed to, at any age, go on this exploration and arrive at a conclusion and choose to share it or not share it with the people that they feel comfortable with. A lot of people may also choose not to come out to everybody. They might come out just to their friends or their immediate family and might not come out at a workplace, or vice versa. Some people might even just come out to themselves. They might just come to terms with the fact that they are different and they're not necessarily cis-het, or that they are cis-het, and that is absolutely valid too. Whatever your choice is, going on an explorative journey of your gender and sexuality is very, very healthy, and it is a healthy part of human development. We hope you enjoyed learning with us and you found this masterclass useful. Don't forget to download your certificate and stay tuned for more such content. We'd also love to hear what you thought of the masterclass and what else would you like for us to include in other sessions. You can also follow me on Instagram @inappropriate.